All right, today we're going to dive into a really powerful pattern for modern test automation. We're talking about using generative AI to create super fast, super reliable test setup scripts for Playwright. So let's jump right in. So let's kick things off with a problem that I bet hits close to home for a lot of you. You know the feeling, right? The actual test itself, the part that checks if something works, it runs in like a few seconds. But getting the app ready for that test? Oh man, that can take minutes of clicking through forms, creating users, adding stuff to a cart. And that right there is almost always the biggest bottleneck in your entire test suite.
And you can see the difference here. It's like night and day. On the left, you've got the old way, the UI-only method. It's slow, it's flaky because it depends on some UI element that might change, and honestly, it's a nightmare to maintain. But look at the right. With API seeding, everything is fast, stable, and lightweight. This is exactly what you want for a modern CI/CD pipeline. This is the big shift we're aiming for.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start by really nailing down that bottleneck problem. Then we'll introduce the core idea of API seeding. After that, we'll bring in the cool stuff, GenAI, to make it all faster. From there, we'll get practical with something called the seed factory pattern, level it up with Playwright fixtures, and then wrap it all up by looking at the huge payoff.
Okay, so like we said, the absolute core of the problem is that test setup, when you're doing it through the user interface, is just the slowest and most unreliable part of the whole process. It's the silent killer of fast feedback loops.
So what's the alternative? Well, the answer is API seeding. Now, before we even start thinking about adding any AI into the mix, we've got to understand this one foundational concept, because it's what makes modern testing so much more robust in the first place.
API seeding is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Instead of pretending to be a user clicking around to create a test account, we just make a direct call to the /users API endpoint. Instead of filling out a big form to create an order, we just post that data directly to the backend. What this gives us is a consistent, repeatable, and seriously lightning-fast way to get our application into the exact state we need for every single test run. Okay, now for the really exciting part. Where does GenAI fit into all this? Well, it's not here to take over our jobs, not at all. Instead, think of it like a super-powered assistant. We can just describe the data we need in plain English, and it can go and generate the first draft of those API calls and data payloads for us. It's a massive head start.
And the workflow is actually pretty simple. Step 1, you just describe what you want. Give me a premium user with 2 orders. Step 2, GenAI spits out the raw API calls to make that happen. But then comes step 3, and this is the most crucial one. This is where you, the developer, come in. We take that raw output, we check it, and then we integrate it into a strong, reusable pattern.
So, how do we actually do that? Well, that brings us to the seed factory pattern. This is how we take those one-off suggestions from the AI and turn them into a maintainable, scalable part of our test suite. And this isn't just about organizing code. It's about creating a single source of truth for all your test data, which prevents things from getting messy and keeps everything consistent.
Let's say we ask the AI for a premium user. It might spit out something just like this. Super simple. A post request, a URL, and a little JSON body. This is our starting point. I mean, it works, but it's not really reusable yet. And this quote here shows our next move. The goal is not to just copy and paste this code all over the place. The goal is to wrap these raw suggestions in dedicated helper functions using Playwright's built-in APIRequestContext, which, by the way, is a tool designed specifically for this exact kind of pre-test setup.
So, this is what that starts to look like in code. We create a seedfactory.ts file. Now, the key idea here is to think of this class as a centralized recipe book for all our test data. You can see the basic structure here, including that init method. And that method is so important because it sets up a single authenticated API client that all our other seeding methods are going to use. That ensures total consistency.
Now, let's zoom in on a specific method inside that factory. Remember that raw JSON suggestion from the AI? Well, look at it now. It's been transformed into this clean, reusable function called createPremiumUser. And the really important part is that we've parameterized the data, like the user's name, so we can use this same logic to create all sorts of different users. This turns a one-time suggestion into a powerful tool we can use across tons of tests.
And here it is. This is how it all comes together in a real test. Just look at this example. First, we initialize our factory. Then we call our helper methods like seed.createPremiumUser and seed.createOrderForUser. All of that happens in milliseconds, talking directly to the API.
Then, and only then, do we actually open the browser with page.goto to check that the UI is showing the data we just created correctly.
Okay, that pattern we just saw is already a massive improvement, but we can make it even cleaner. This is the pro move, upgrading our seed factory into what's called a Playwright fixture. You should think of fixtures like a personal assistant for your tests. You just tell the test, hey, I need my seed tool, and the assistant, which is Playwright, gets it all ready for you automatically behind the scenes.
I mean, the difference is just so clear. On the left, we're manually setting up our seed factory in every single test file. That's a lot of repetitive boilerplate code. But on the right, we're using a fixture. That seed object just magically appears as a parameter in our test. Playwright is handling all the setup and teardown for us. It is just so much cleaner.
So, you're probably wondering, how does that magic work? Well, it all happens in this base test file using test.extend. Let's just take a quick look at this code. What we're doing here is basically telling Playwright, hey, whenever a test asks for seed, I want you to run this setup code to initialize our seed factory, give it to the test, and then clean it up when the test is done. You write this code one time, and every single test in your project can use it.
Whew, okay. We have covered a lot of ground, from a simple GenAI prompt all the way to a really sophisticated testing pattern. So let's just step back for a second and look at the payoff. Why would you go through all this trouble? Because it fundamentally transforms your entire automation suite.
The benefits here are just immense. Your tests become dramatically faster because you're skipping all those slow UI interactions. They become way more reliable because you're not at the mercy of some flaky front-end element. You can run tons of tests in parallel, each with its own perfectly isolated data, and it all leads to what we all want, a lightweight, stable, and incredibly fast CI/CD pipeline.
And the impact is absolutely huge. By moving your test setup from the UI to the API, you can slash test setup flakiness by over 90%. Think about what that means. Fewer random failures, way less time debugging, and so much more confidence in your results.
So, we'll end with this thought. We've seen how GenAI can act as an amazing assistant to kickstart our API seeding, but you gotta know this is just the beginning. The key is to think about how these tools can augment our workflows, not just replace them. So the real question I'll leave you with is this: what part of your test setup will you have AI help you with next?